Black people all over the world are suffering and dying too soon from illnesses that have plagued our communities for centuries. At Indigenous Health, we are on a mission to build the most valuable and genetically diverse data bank on the planet. Although people with African ancestry make up more than 20% of the global population, our genetic data is less than 3% of the data used in drug discovery. We are frustrated by the status quo and are determined to make a difference by becoming the change we want to see. We know you have lots of questions, and we're excited to answer those questions. You will also receive a free personalized health assessment. Join our community today at byusforall.com. All right. Hello and welcome to our Founders Live for this first week in February. Really excited to engage you all and talk with you all. Today we have our other co-founder, founder Michael Akinyele, and president of Indigenous Health on board. Hi, Michael. And our special guest we have is the Henriques family. So Yusuf, our founder and CEO, is joined by his daughters, Kayla and Kiara. So we're going to meet them and talk a bit about retinitis pigmentosa and a condition that they actually have. And it speaks to some of the motivation that Yusuf had to start the company. So we're really excited to talk to you. Just want to let you know we're planning on going about 45 minutes. We always go a little longer and it gets a little more fun at the end. So we have the time for an hour to talk about retinitis pigmentosa. We'll be joined later by some other folks on the team. Dr. Bradford Wilson will be here. And we'll just jump right in to get started so that we have time for our fun conversation. Michael, I'd like to pass the ball to you for some company updates.
Sure thing. Thanks, Madia, and welcome to Kayla and KR. Glad to have you here, and looking forward to the impact you're going to make on Yusuf's presentation today. I'm excited, actually. Company updates. The biggest update is upgrades to the app are being tested. And so we're excited to share that with everyone later this month. I think all the reviews we've gotten so far have been exceptional. So we can't wait for everyone to get their hands on some of the upgrades that we have that ultimately allow for folks to build a community around different topics or different issues. And through that community, get more access to healthcare. Ultimately, our vision is to provide free healthcare to 1 billion people by 2030. And we intend to do that through the technology platforms that we're building. And so at this point, that is the primary focus of our work and the primary focus of when we think about updates. Aside from that, we have a couple of things in the works that will show up as press releases over the coming weeks. And so don't want to sneak that out just yet, but just heads up that it's coming. And then last but not least, we're excited to continue to work with our impact advisors to really share our story. And we have a couple of episodes of conversations that we recorded, and those episodes should be coming out later this month as well, because it's part of our celebration of Black History Month. So those are the updates from me. Any questions on any of the things I mentioned? Nope. All right.
None here. Yusuf, you have anything to add to that?
No, welcome everybody again. We've been getting us started on a lot of movement, as Michael mentioned. Super excited to have Dr. Matthews join in last week just to follow on a lot of the stuff that we're talking about. So this week was a perfect setup for what we want to talk about, which is some of the disease areas that are affecting Black, Indigenous people of color, which is something that's near and dear to myself. Being that I father of 4 daughters, these are some of the areas that we're trying to focus at Indigenous Health Group to address some of these health disparities and rare disease areas that are affecting our communities. Excited to kind of talk about, what, the family has been going through over the last couple of years and how we've been able to address uh, health disparity within the Enriquez family.
Great. Well, thank you so much. I wanted to give our special guest, not that you're not special, Yusuf, but I wanted to give our special guest, our new guest, an opportunity to just introduce themselves, maybe tell us a little bit about what you're studying, just a little intro about yourself. Whichever would like to start.
Go by the oldest, 2 minutes.
2 minutes.
2 minutes older than, well, okay. Ayla, the floor is yours.
All right. Hi, I'm Kayla. I'm currently studying IT. I don't really know what else to say. I'm really nervous. It's okay. I go to school I go to school at Nova Southeastern University, but currently I'm taking classes at MC right now, and pretty much it.
Great. Thank you. And Kiara?
Okay. Hi. My name is Kiara. I'm studying psychology and I'm planning to transfer to Drexel University next year. I currently study also at Montgomery College. And yes, I am the younger one. So that's it.
Younger by 2 minutes. Wow. That's great. Well, let's jump into the deck a little more. Yusuf, could you just give us a quick introduction to what retinitis pigmentosa is?
Yeah, so, we found out in 2014, routine eye visit, normal visit in New York when I was working for the Department of Veteran Affairs at the Bronx VA. And so, yeah, one of the eye specialists came to me and pretty much explained to me that, this could be a potential diagnosis. So, retinitis pigmentosa, never knew anything about it. But, as, the girls kept getting confirmation of diagnosis, it's really, an eye disorder inherited from parents of the individual. And so, back of the retina is where causes loss of vision, loss of eyesight over the maturation of the individual. So early signs of that in the girls were where we started to notice that they couldn't see in the dark, which is one of the symptoms on the early onset of the condition. And as they started to develop and get a little older. They were about 14 at the time when they were diagnosed officially at the New York Eye and Ear. I didn't want to take that as the only diagnosis. So I moved down to DC and went to Johns Hopkins Wilmer Eye Institute, where we got the second confirmation. And so held that from the girls for a little bit. So they were diagnosed 2014, but waited till they were 2015, 2016 when I got the second diagnosis over that 1 year that we were still waiting to see how to address this with the girls. As you can imagine, in our community, getting that type of news, I was deeply concerned around the mental health state of the girls, being that they were teenagers. So as a parent, I decided to hold the diagnosis from them until we had a full confirmation that it was actually retinitis pigmentosa.
Understood. Kayla and Kiara, is there anything you all care to share about just that experience and kind of going through that process of being diagnosed at such a young age?
Well, yeah. I mean, naturally, of course, it's going to be a shock to us. I mean, because we didn't really know how to react. We all thought it was a normal routine visit, like my dad said. So when we saw all four doctors walk into the room and kind of like stand there, we're like, what's going on? Like, we're confused. We're assuming he's confused because we didn't know about it because, he wanted to protect us, like, just to make sure, confirm it. So
Sure.
when they finally told us, we were hurt. We didn't understand. We didn't know what to do. They told us that we might lose our vision depending on how fast it progresses. I mean, but it started making sense with all the night blindness. There's a little bit of light sensitivity to it. So sometimes when we walk outside, the sun like hurts sometimes to look at, which, you know, you shouldn't be looking at the sun, but it sometimes just hurts even like walking around normally.
Wow.
So it was a shock to us. So we just didn't know what to do. And then they told us there's currently no cure for it. So even first on the table for us as 15-year-olds.
Yeah. Wow. I see Dr. Wilson has joined us. Dr. Wilson, you have any follow-ups or anything you'd like to share about the cause of retinitis pigmentosa? Yusuf walked us through it a little bit, but I wanted to give you the opportunity to talk a little bit about the illness, you know, as a PhD.
Sure, I can share a little bit of insight on it from the genetic perspective. So when we talk about, you know, conditions like this, where we have a particular tissue affected, is thinking in terms of how we develop, you know, as embryos in the womb during, you know, 9 months of pregnancy. There's whole lots of processes going on and tissues are getting developed, and all of these processes that take place, there can sometimes be, you know, things that don't go as intended. So when we talk about retinitis pigmentosa, we were talking about the retina of the eye, and this is a very, you know, highly specialized piece, piece of anatomy, part of your eye that, you know, is responsible for processing all the light that, you know, in terms of, you know, your vision. And in this case, where we have some issues in how that layer of tissue is organized, and there could be some disorder. And then when you have the disruption of the natural order, organization of the tissue, it can cause some problems. So we have, you know, about 25,000 genes in our whole genome, and I think over 50 genes have been identified to be responsible for causing, you know, different forms of retinitis pigmentosa. And it's actually inherited in a few different ways. So there is an autosomal recessive form, meaning that there are 2 copies of certain variants that are required to for a person to have retinitis pigmentosa. And then in other cases, there are other genes where only 1 copy is required, and that's called autosomal dominant inheritance. And then in some other cases where we have retinitis pigmentosa in males, where it can be X-linked, meaning some causes can be associated with the X chromosome, and a female can be a carrier and then transmit it to their son, excuse me. So, but overall, there are a ton of genes that are involved in, you know, the development and the normal function of your retina that, you know, allows you the capability to see. And like I said, to date, over 50 genes have been associated in terms of specific variants that have been associated. And I wanted to ask, I didn't get a chance to ask Yusuf and the young ladies and the ladies if they had, when they got their diagnosis, did they say anything about any specific genes that they saw in your report? If you remember, you may or may not.
Yeah, so it's dominant recessive. So, you know, it's been 7 years now that I really have been, you know, dealing with this with the girls. So spent a lot of time researching, as you can imagine, looking for studies all over the world, taking them to, you know, luckily we had good health insurance through the government, working for the government. So, you know, the girls were able to benefit from that, of being able to see some of the, you know, well-renowned researchers. However, you know, as Dr. Wilson just mentioned, those 50 genes, it still hasn't really been studied in extensive research. Not a lot of funding has been put to it, and so, you know, that's one of the reasons why in the conception of indigenous AI was developed, was to really start looking at these rare disease areas that are affecting my girls. This wasn't even a community at the time. And so, I have been on a race to try to figure out how to, one, slow down the condition. The girls are about 60% right now, visual acuity. What that means is there's no peripheral vision. And as they mentioned, as young as 7 or 8, they couldn't see in the dark. So still progressing. Every year we're supposed to do an assessment. It's quite laborious, expensive, and takes up quite 2 days of studies and electrodes all over their face, which is a little bit depressing. Since COVID, we haven't been able to go back. But the other burden is that since they're females and most of the doctors are males, I have to have a chaperone go with both of them. So I have to take one, and then someone else has to sit in that dark room with them for 5 to 6 hours for 2 days to get those testing done.
Wow. That's so interesting. Now we have a slide here, Yusuf, that shares a little bit about the stats, for African Americans. And I just wanted to see between you and Brad, and even Michael, if you have a thought or anything to add to this slide. But it indicates that Black patients with retinitis pigmentosa are twice as likely as white patients to develop this macular lesion. Is there any insight you all can give us from just a research perspective or clinical perspective on what does that mean for Black patients?
Sure, I guess I'll take that one. So in this particular case, when we have, this is an example of what we refer to as health disparities, right? Where we see disproportionate either incidence or disproportionate severity of a disease or something of that nature between different populations. And in this particular case, we see that in African Americans or Black patients with retinitis pigmentosa, there is this more frequent occurrence of this macular lesion. What is driving it? Research. The research will tell us. We have, a lot more powerful research tools available to us now, and that can help to identify, what specific genetic variants are driving these things. And even just by looking at Yusuf's DNA and his daughter's DNA alone, we could look at the differences between his DNA and theirs, and then potentially pick up some clues as to what the genetic variants that are driving this. In terms of, in addition to, in that case, that's one of our powerful research tools that we can use. And then to look at what we would do is look at a group of Black patients with retinitis pigmentosa, and then look at the variants that are common among them, and then individuals specifically with this macular lesion. Patients with the lesions versus with not, and then you could do those types of comparisons and then kind of figure out, what if there are any specific genetic drivers that are associated with this macular lesion within patients who are dealing with retinitis pigmentosa.
Yeah,
and I guess it would be a good time to point out that in addition to the research, the science is yielding some potential opportunities that have some applications. In this particular case of rare forms of blindness, there are some promising new technologies and new therapies being developed, specifically gene therapies, and specifically in the case of rare blindness that have been successful. So that's kind of a proof of principle, and that in terms of that you can potentially, rewrite the genes that have been that have errors in them that are responsible for the phenotype that we see once we have them identified. And there's a lot involved, and but there is the potential for it to happen. And so this is being applied to, as I mentioned, rare forms of blindness and also other diseases that we know that there is a single genetic cause, like sickle cell, for example. There's a gene therapy in development to essentially address that, where you could convert people who have 2 copies into individuals who have essentially 1 copy, to make them what's called a heterozygote, or just a carrier, as opposed to someone who's affected.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I talked to Dr. Cameron Matthews from last week, and she shared that that she actually had some deep insights into it because she recently learned that she was a carrier. And so that was a really interesting, conversation for us to have. And I was asking, because I'm not a scientist, so I'm like, does a carrier means that you don't have any of the symptoms of the illness, right? Like, I'm a carrier of sickle cell, but I don't have sickle cell disease, right? And so is that the same with retinitis pigmentosa?
Yeah, when we say carrier, we're referring to the group of diseases that have the same mode of inheritance that we call autosomal recessive and require 2 copies. Like you, I am also a carrier. I have sickle cell trait as well. So I have 1 copy of the variant that's responsible for sickle cell. And so does my son, right? And then, so for an individual to be affected, for diseases inherited in this way, you have to have 2 copies, and you get 1 from each parent, and then you're affected. And then similarly, there's a 2 in 4 chance, or 1 out of 2 chance, that you'll be a carrier. And then there's 1 out of 4 chance that you'll be neither affected or a carrier. That's for 2 individuals who have 1 copy.
Understood. So Yusuf, now it feels like a really good place. Unless, Michael, if you have any questions, we can go to yours. But I just want to set it up for Kayla and Kiara and Yusuf. If there is, or not if, because I know that there is, but your game plan for addressing this and how Indigenous health factors into that game plan for addressing this illness in your family. I want you all to speak to that a little bit. But first, I want to go to Michael to see just if, Michael, you got any questions for the family?
Nah, question for the family, not really. It's more of thanking the family for joining us and being vulnerable to kind of share what they've been going through. We appreciate it. And, ultimately, this is what led to the vision Yusuf had to build all of this, right? So ultimately, we're on this mission to try and make a difference. From a question standpoint, it's really to Dr. Wilson to see if the concept of finding protective variants could be applied in this case as well, where it's about, and I don't know how the research would be set up, but it's more in the context of if there are folks who are potentially doing better, having the disease, being able to see if there is, any variant within their genes that could be copied or explored, or maybe even looking at folks who don't have it and saying, is there a protective variant that could be explored? And so it's really about, is there an approach to looking for protective variants, and what would that potentially look like?
Yeah, good question, Michael. So the whole idea of protective variants is kind of more so applied when you have an issue, say like diabetes or hypertension, where there's a range of blood pressures and there's a range of blood sugars. And then some variants may put you in a better position to have a normal range of blood sugar or blood pressure versus an abnormal range of blood sugar or blood pressure. And then those things are in the context of diet. In this case, it's more of it's not a range. It's more of an affected, unaffected situation and a kind of a binary situation. But in this case, you have, like you said, over 50 genes that can give you the two outcomes here. So it's not quite the same application in terms of what you refer to as like protective variants in this case. But there may be some variants that we may be able to identify that say are associated with the macular the macular finding the macular atrophy that Madia mentioned in the previous slide in terms of variants that may be associated with that among people who are affected by retinitis pigmentosa.
Got it. Thank you.
We actually got a question from someone watching, and I'm just going to pull it up here. And is retinitis pigmentosa curable, or do the young ladies have to take medication to manage it?
So yeah, no, it's still at this point not curable. Inherited rare disease. And so going back a little bit to what you mentioned about the game plan. So 2014 diagnosed, 2015 diagnosed by Wilma Eye Institute at Johns Hopkins. But the only solution then was vitamin A. We had some reproductive consequences of the girls potentially not being able to reproduce and have children. So you can imagine as a father, that weighed heavily on me, and made the decision that we were going to use natural, remedies and kind of take matters in our own hands, which is what Indigenous now has been formed out to do, which is form a community. Fortunate for me, this is my community. So we were able to, again, with the guidance of, a pediatrician, and also started to use some of the, herbal remedies that were recommended, that we looked up online, did a lot of Googling, a lot of peer review article reading. And so, we've been able to, keep it stable. Because again, I think literally, you just have to understand that the rods and the cones, and if you learned in anatomy and physiology or biology, they're just shutting off in both of the girls.
Wow.
So it's not a matter of if, it's when, they'll become legally blind. Now, some people, fortunately, with lifestyle change, diet, nutrition, could extend it out to where they can never completely become blind. But we had to start thinking about and prepared about reading Braille. And as Brad mentioned, there's a lot of assistive medical device tools that are being developed now, that could help, but these are still things that would have to alter, they have to wear these big goggles. So, it's going to impact their quality of life. And then the vitamin A was just not an option for me. So as Dr. Wilson mentioned, Indigenous is what I created as my outlet to start looking at gene therapy, gene and cell therapy, to start addressing, certain things like these, to, like he said, to correct those mutated variants that are causing, these type of disease in our community. So, we just had to kind of, make that decision, and, hopefully that, that'll be able to help slow it down until I had to come up with something that's more feasible, or, research out there that are studying this area, get funding for it, and or be able to, again, address, an area where I think, again, your eyesight, that's your window to your soul. So, again, continuously on a race to make sure that they keep their eyesight for as long as they can. And so they've not been able to do some of the things over their lifetime, like driving, because, that was something that was very concerning for me, the fact that they can't see in the dark. You can imagine they start to work, they have to, travel. I normally consider, harmful things if they can't see in the dark or where they are, walking on the street. But, those are some of the things that we've been able to be benefit from by being in a community where they've been protected and guarded around some of the things that would be more problematic if I didn't have some of the resources that we have.
Yusuf, I was going to ask that just with your experience working in FDA, working at Mount Sinai, how are you using that expertise kind of to navigate the system of care for your family?
Yeah, I mean, having the knowledge helps, but I think what we touched on is the fact that funding is a little slow. It's a rare disease,
Mm-hmm.
so it's not a blockbuster. So, again, I am lucky to have the knowledge and background to go out and start to, research and literally created indigenous to address a genetic, mutation that my own family has, right? I think that's what, the takeaway from this is if you're watching, and that's what indigenous is creating. We're creating, opportunities in the areas where, we don't have that diversity of folks in those trials. And so, what he explained earlier is I essentially could form my own study now with his help,
Mm-hmm.
with Dr. Wilson's help, and go through those processes that he mentioned, identifying the genes that are affected within my family, and highlight that. And then, hopefully we'll have more individuals become aware of the kind of studies we're doing in our minority population so we could address not only, their eye condition, but as Dr. Wilson said, sickle cell, hypertension, cardiovascular, all of those areas are areas that have been, health disparities in our community. And so we're just going to start attacking them one by one as we continue to build these communities. So today it's retinitis pigmentosa, tomorrow it'll be cardiovascular, and the next day, it's hypertension and sickle cell. And that's really our vision and mission at Indigenous is to start addressing these areas where, again, affects, as you saw, the statistics. There's a lot of disease other than theirs that affect our minority community at alarming rates of 2 to 3 times other ethnic backgrounds.
Right, right. Yeah, that's very, very true. I just brought up this slide because as we were putting it together, this was an organization, fightingblindness.org, that you shared with us and told us about this organization. We're going to highlight it this week as we talk about retinitis pigmentosa more for our audience. So I just wanted to give you, Yusuf, the opportunity to talk a little bit about the foundation Fighting Blindness and any of the work that you've done with them.
Yeah, no, it's just been me as a parent, right? Looking for
Right.
communities that even understand what you're going through, right? Instead of just having one kid, I have 2 kids with this condition. So, again, Fighting Blindness, that group, I've been watching them since I found out the diagnosis. That's literally where I got a lot of my information from when I found out their condition and what they've been doing. And so, it's an organization that, has put a lot of interest in it, not just, retinitis pigmentosa, but also other rare forms of macular degeneration and other stuff. So, it's where I was able to get some information. But, again, I think, what you've heard from us over the last 120 days is we're trying to create a community of individuals that look like us, right? I'm trying to create a community I know where my African American ophthalmologists are and can get insight on some of these things because, again, each individual ethnic background does have some, say on how you go about some of these treatments. And if, again, the general information is good for general knowledge. However, again, as you can imagine, as a father, I need specifics because, Kiara, which is to my left, asked me if I was going to fix this 7 years ago. And so I'm still working on it. But again, I think we're in the right direction, at the right team at Indigenous to kind of focus on this. And, as we go forward, try to make this more awareness in our community so we can have more clinicians and physicians, researchers like Dr. Wilson, Dr. Gordon, and medical professionals, Dr. Matthews, start really highlighting some of these areas and put some focus on it so we could go out and raise the money that we could support organizations like Indigenous and and foundations like Fighting Blindness that really are addressing some of the needs that we need at a community level.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's great. How do you all stay hopeful in the face of such a serious, diagnosis? I have horrible vision. I have my contact lenses in right now, but I just can't imagine, you know what I mean? And so how do you stay hopeful? Are you all focused on planning and kind of measurement and execution? Is there, what is it that you all kind of believe in, or how are you all remaining hopeful in the face of this diagnosis?
You want to take it? I I don't really know. It's kind of just we just do the test and kind of try to move past it. Like it happened. It's kind of what we have. It's the cards we were dealt. So it's just we just have to move on with it, get the test done, do what we can to prevent it, and just keep going.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I know in the beginning we kind of were like trying even to tell our father that no, we didn't want to go because we didn't want to know more about it. But like even when you go to get your routine eye exam, like my vision changes every year I go. So
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of like there's nothing I can do about it. We just have to, provide the information and just, keep waiting for any sort of testing or any sort of thing that we can do in the future. So that's all we can really do. But it's okay, especially because I have someone else going through it with me. So
Yeah.
that's all good. Not to sound corny, but yeah, at least I have a person to go through it with me. And I'm not in this by myself. And our dad is trying his best with his company to get something done. So
That's great. Has it
Yeah.
impacted your career decisions or your decisions about what you're studying?
not really. I mean, honestly,
Right.
I'm working more on mental health. So, I mean, I want to help people who, have to go through some hard, difficult life cards, like life choices like this, who have
Sure.
this and can't do much. Like, I want to help them get through it mentally. Therefore, they still, want to have, the will to keep going. Like, it's okay.
Mhm.
Like, it's not the end of the world for everybody. Um, but other than that, I just want to help mentally.
Yeah, again, I think execution wise, it's just there was not a lot of option, and that was the table 7 years ago just wasn't something that I was willing to take the risk on.
Sure.
Each father and mother and parents is going to have to make those tough choices and decisions. But I believe in the science, and again, this is one of the reasons there's tragedy that occurs in your life that gives you that motivation. This is what motivates me every day since that diagnosis. As you can imagine, traumatic and both devastating and depressing to know that your two oldest daughters that are now 21 years old are going through this and have to plan and prepare for the what if, meaning that we would have to start learning how to walk with a cane, things like learning braille. So
Hmm.
these are all things that have been uh, things that we have to decide on. Because again, as mentioned, it's part of now that we know the diagnosis, we have to kind of move in that direction in order to make the steps in the planning. But again, hopeful that there is going to be devices and technology that advance. Um, I'm deeply confident that I have the team that's gonna help me get through this and get to a some level of gene therapy, cell therapy, and work with medical device communities in order to get them aided up. Because again, I think statistically shown, complete blindness comes around 40
Right.
statistically. So racing against the clock. So again, I think we've pretty much figured out right now, how to they live their daily lives, they work. The only things that bother me is when they go out late at night and they have to come home, and come home home from work and have to take metro or take the train or Uber, those are the concerns, because they don't have any peripheral, so they wouldn't even be able to see somebody that's coming up from behind them. So you can imagine as a father, even though they're 21 years old now, those are the things that's still in the back of my mind, but we're in a good, safe community where, they work within the community. So it's not that big of a concern. So their daily lives haven't been too much affected. They graduated high school, got accepted to college the first go around. So, we've been able to keep, mentally stable, being able to keep them hopeful and still live a productive life, start paying some taxes and some bills.
Really?
So one of the things I want to do, again, everybody has, something that they're going to be dealing with, and so, they've been able to push through, graduate. You can imagine at 15 years old, this could have went a different direction mentally wise, without that support. So, it all comes back to creating that community. As she said, she had somebody else. Imagine if we all had people that was around you that could kind of share information and go through it. Like you said, like you said, it sounds corny, but having somebody to go through it with you is the type of community we want to set up and create within our app, which is our BIOS for All .com initiative, because this is how we're going to get through some of these things, is that community engagement, health literacy around these disease areas that prior to this I had no idea about. You heard about glaucoma or some of the other ones, just because I'm in the scientific field, but had no idea what retinitis pigmentosa was until the doctor mentioned it to me.
Wow.
That actually raised a question for me, for Kayla and Kiara. Actually, are you looking for? Do you feel like you have some your experiences? You sharing your experiences that you've had with other folks. You feel like there's you can kind of played a role for some folks in the community who are dealing with this, who may have not have had a sister, to kind of, go through this with, and, kind of being able to help out other folks who are kind of dealing with this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we definitely, like she said before, we're here together. We're originally, when we got the diagnosis, we were like, oh, it's rare. Nobody else has this. Like, we're the only people. If there were a community of all of us together, like, hey, we're all going through the same thing, because, you share your struggles with some people and people don't know what you're talking about. We've told several of our friends, yeah, we can't see in the dark. They're like, how can't you see in the dark? It doesn't make any sense. But if there's a community of all of us going through, we can't see in the dark, it's supportive. It's really helpful for all of us. Therefore, we know that we're not the only people going through it.
Yeah. Even calling out the support of having each other shows the importance of the community, right? Of a community of folks that can relate, and because they also have some of the same, some of those shared experiences.
Mm-hmm.
No, I think, to the point Yusuf made about the eye diseases or conditions in general that people are familiar with, I too was not aware that retinitis pigmentosa existed, right, until met Yusuf and we had this conversation. And I almost wonder sort of two things. First, how many people are out there that don't even know they have it because they didn't get access to the diagnosis. And then the second question, which is, so the second piece. So one, I wonder. The second is, prior to the conversation here, I got a sense that you all make fun of your dad and like to crack jokes and things. So I was kind of curious if you all have ever tried to play a joke related to this. And I don't know which way it is. I'm not even proposing that you play a joke. I'm just kind of curious if you ever try to play a joke.
Oh my goodness.
And if you did, I'd love to kind of hear how.
I'm so afraid of this answer. I'm gonna cut the question. I'm just gonna cut it.
It's funny because one of our like coping mechanisms for each other is just making jokes. We're very funny people. We like making jokes. So when like I don't know, he'll say something probably that we're not supposed to be outside. Like it's dark. We'll be one of the three blind mice from I don't know if you've seen Shrek. So.
Oh my gosh. And we like to joke about a story. Like when I was younger, I literally ran into a stop sign that was right in front of me. And so we just like to reference funny stories that happen. It's just like how we get over it and how we're okay with it. But yeah, I mean, we just joke about it all the time. So it's not that big a deal sometimes, but you know, it is what it is.
Sometimes he laughs, sometimes he doesn't. But we think it's funny.
What does that ratio look like? Like laughs to not laughs?
There's a very small percentage of the time where he actually laughs. Other times he kind of just looks at us like, dude, are you serious? Like, this is a serious topic. Like, you're losing your vision. We're like, yeah, but it's a joke.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
But I have a story for you.
Oh.
Both got in trouble at school, and the principal called me in because they had video footage of the individual that did it. But as you can imagine, the school couldn't figure out who.
Distinguish them.
They needed an expert witness to come in and ID the perp.
That's hilarious.
Right. And so it was a little challenging because they had wrote a note, and one of the words they were still learning how to spell. One of the words was spelled incorrectly, but they both spelled it incorrectly. So I couldn't ID them that way. So I had to go to the footage.
Wow.
So I had to go to the footage because they the handwriting of the note that was placed was not enough evidence to pick out the individual out of the two of them. It was clear it was out of the two of them. But at the end of the day, justice prevailed. I was able to find who the individual was that delivered the note.
Listen.
I'm trying to see whose face looks guilty.
Well, I think they were both guilty because one wrote it and the other one delivered it. So it was double verdict. But
Accomplices.
Teamwork makes the dream work.
Teamwork makes the dream work.
About stories. No, because no. I wasn't the perp. I'll just say that.
Listen, I feel like the live after the go live is going to be the best moment because when we sign off, we're going to have 500 more questions that you all will probably not be permitted to answer, but we're going to fire them off anyway. I want to thank you all for joining us and just ask just one more time around the table. Are there any more questions or comments? I know we got a couple. We got a couple from the audience today, which thank you all for joining us because it's rare that we get that interaction. But any questions just from the other founders or team members on the call before we close?
Just wanted to thank the Henriques family for joining us today and for keeping it, honest and light. And serious at times. I think it just shows the spectrum of what people go through when they have a diagnosis, and they kind of have to just walk with it and work with it. We hope that the platform we're building can help you extend the community that you already have around RP, and we look forward to partnering up with your dad to continue this work to see how far we can get. We are on the clock. This is serious, and we are going to make a difference. And I look forward to when we're able to. There's no bell to ring, but I don't know. We'll cut the ribbon. We will do something. So I'm looking forward to that day.
Yeah, I just want to echo the thanks. Really appreciate you ladies, joining us and, sharing, opening up, sharing this, with folks. This is not a small thing. I'm not a public person, so I kind of wanted to specifically, thank you both for kind of sharing experiences and stories with us. And definitely, we're going to do everything that we can to, potentially find some answers. So no, there is not a cure currently, but the technology exists, and that's the important part. And it's just a matter of applying it the appropriate way to get the outcomes that we want.
Great. Well, we'll pass it to Yusuf to close us out. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for having your family on board, your beautiful family on board to talk to us a bit. Yusuf, would you like to just kind of close us out and make that appeal for the app?
I think, what I wanted to do was, open up to let folks know that, not only, is Indigenous, trying to help a community that we know has been left behind on research and health disparity areas, but we're also human beings and parents and fathers and sons and daughters of individuals with different disease areas that affects our communities. So, a lot of people ask me, when do I sleep? Because of the things that I'm doing. Hopefully that gave you a little bit of insight of why I'm doing what I'm doing for the last, several years. Is because, myself was hit with a rare disease condition that affects my family. And so, I'm doing everything in my power to get a community around to join and, help not only my daughters, but help future generation of individuals that develop these conditions. And so, that's what we've created at Indigenous Health Group and our biosforall.com web app is to create these communities within our community so that we can start addressing some of these disease areas that are, highly relevant, needs attention. And this is just one of the ways in order to do it. Looking forward for anybody else that wants to share their story as well. Please reach out to us
Yes.
through our channels. And love to, again, educate and answer any other questions that individuals may have. But, really appreciate those that have attended and get to hear my story and the reason why Indigenous Health Group and Indigenous AI exist is because, we have to start doing something for our community and getting our physicians, clinicians together in order for us to, again, drive precision health equity.
Great. Well, thank you all for joining us. You all have some thank yous trickling in, so I just wanted to share those with you all. Thank you again for joining us, and we will be back next week where we'll be talking about HIV. So we will see you all then. Thanks for joining. Bye.